We are now in the days of Sefirah because of the events that happened, and the Gemara explains to us what exactly happened. The Gemara in Yevamos tells us, Shneim Asa Elef Zugim Talmidim, 12,000 pairs of students, 12,000 chavrusas, Hayel Rebbe Akiva, were students of Rebbe Akiva. Megivas Antrifas, they spread out throughout the land of Israel. V'kulan Mesu Beperek Echad, all 24,000 died in one short time period. Why is it? Mipnei shelo nagu kavod zeh lezeh, because they did not treat each other with honor. It was a devastation, it was a calamity, the best of the best, 12,000 zugim, 12,000 pairs, meaning again 24,000 students die. Via olam shamim, the world was desolate. Until Rebbe Akiva came to the rabbis in the south of Shanalem, he taught them, Reb Meir, Reb Yehuda, Reb Yossi, Reb Shimon, Reb Elazar, Reb Shmua, Vehem Hem Mimidu Torah Osashah. And Rebbe Akiva re-established the Masorah through these 5 great Talmidei Chachamim. The Gemara continues, Tanu Kula Mesum in Pesach V'Adatzeres. All of these great Talmidei Chachamim, the 24,000, died in a short time period from Pesach till Shavuos. That's why we have Sefirah during this time period. And the Gemara tells us they all died of Misarah, a terrible death, Achsara, some type of choking death. Okay. Now, as a nation, we have lived through many tragedies. Destructions, war, famines, exiles, persecutions, pogroms, annihilations. We are no stranger to suffering. Yet very few events make it onto our national calendar. And this one did. This is one of history's greatest tragedies. 2,000 years later, almost to that extent, we're still mourning this event. We don't make weddings, we don't shave, we don't listen to music. It has shaped our world and it affects us till today. If you'd like to understand what it was like, it's equivalent in our day and age if the great yeshivas, Lakewood, Mir, Chavetz Chaim, Chaim Berlin, tells if all the yeshivas suddenly, Talmid Rachman Litzlan died. Thousands and thousands, if you can imagine, Rachman Litzlan, Baruch Hashem, today we have in Lakewood 9,000 people learning full time. With Mir Yerushalayim is close to that. Rachman Litzlan, I can't even say the words, but that was a type of tragedy. If you'd imagine the base Bati Midrashim emptied out and devastation, that was the level of tragedy in the time. All the yeshivas lost their best, the cream of the crop, and it is a tragedy that lasts with us till today. But I'd like to know what we're supposed to learn from this, because when we keep a part of our calendar and when Chazal put it into halacha and into the Masorah, there's something for us to learn from it. And the question is, what is the application? What are we supposed to take from this? So let's begin with a misnomer, with a mistake that people make. People commonly assume if the Talmidim of Rebbe Akiva were killed, they must have been bores, they must have been rude, obnoxious people, pushing, shoving. Oh my goodness, if Hashem had to kill out this cadre of Talmidei Chachamim, they must have been the worst of the worst. However, that is historically not accurate. The Gemara doesn't say they cursed, they pushed, they shoved, they were rude, obnoxious. Lo nagu kavod zeh bezeh. They didn't treat each other with the honor due to each other. They weren't noe kavod. They didn't act with the honor due. Okay, so now that we have it in perspective, the question is, what are we supposed to take from it? What is the lesson? And more significantly, let's ask the pointed question. Why is it that they were not noe kavod zeh bezeh? Let's sort of focus on the following. There's a mitzvah aseh midaraisa called Avas Yisrael. The Sefirah-The explains, Lev kol echam Yisrael avas nefesh. I'm obligated to love every fellow Jew with a love. I'm obligated to be concerned for their benefit, to be concerned for their welfare, to look out for their good. It's a mitzvah aseh min Torah. And, as a matter of fact, the Gemara tells us that klal gadol b'Torah, it's a major theme in the Torah. And the Gemara explains to us what that means. If you look at the theme that runs throughout the Torah, the chord that runs throughout all the mitzvahs, and this is it, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, it's a klal gadol b'Torah, it's a great principle in the Torah. But I'd like to ask you a very pointed question. Who said that statement? That statement, Zeh klal gadol b'Torah, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, loving your friend like yourself, is a great principle in the Torah. It's the underpinning. It's the core, the theme that runs throughout the Torah. Who made that statement? Amar Rebbe Akiva. Rebbe Akiva is the one who made that statement. Rebbe Akiva was their Rebbe. Rebbe Akiva taught them V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. And I believe that if you understood what was happening there, they were tremendous, tremendous people. They had chesed committees and gamachs, and they were lovely, lovely people. But the problem was lo nagu covered zeh b'zeh. But what does that mean? They loved each other, and they acted with tremendous chesed to each other, but they weren't noe covered zeh b'zeh. And to understand, in fact, what the flaw of the Talmidim was, what they were held accountable for, and again, assuming certainly that they loved each other as each other, they were tremendous, tremendous people. These were students of Rebbe Akiva, Tanoim in their own rights. They were people of tremendous stature, and they fulfilled the Torah, including V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. So what was lacking? What does the Gemara mean when it says, Lo nagu kavod zeh b'zeh, they didn't treat each other with honor? And to answer this question, you'll excuse me for being a little bit Jewish and answering this question with another question. I heard my Rebbe, the Shivas Atzal, speak about a pasuk in Chumash. Pasuk in Bereshit says, Zeh Sefer told us Adam, and this is the story of the creation of man, Biyom Bara Elokim Adam, the day that Hashem created man, B'dmus Elokim Aso. Hashem made man in the image of Hashem. And the Daz HaKanim brings down a fascinating machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Ben Azai. Rabbi Akiva says, V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, that's Klal Gadol b'Torah, the great principle in the Torah. If you want to reach the heights, you want to reach the true pinnacle of greatness, love your neighbor as yourself. Says Ben Azai, this pasuk that we just read will bring a person to even greater heights of Ben Adam l'chaveru. Why? Because what this pasuk says is, B'tselem Elokim nivra Adam. Hashem created man in the image of Hashem. And the Daz HaKanim explains why. I see the image of my friend, but I don't see my own image. Says Ben Azai, this pasuk will propel you to greater heights than V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. As much as you love your friend, that'll bring you to treat him properly, knowing that my friend was created in the image of Hashem will bring me to greater heights. And my Rebbe, the Shivas Atzal, asked, this doesn't seem to make sense. Because V'ahavta l'recha kamocha is the heights. How could you be a bigger Bal Chesed, a greater person? How could you be more concerned for anybody than if you fulfill V'ahavta l'recha kamocha? And let me give you an example of what I mean by that. I was a high school Rebbe for many years, and the guys lived in the dorms. Now I want you to imagine for a minute the following. Imagine it's 2 o'clock in the morning, and one fellow says to his friend, Maishi, Maishi, I'm thirsty. So get some water. No, but Maishi, I'm too tired to get out of bed. So go to sleep. No, but Maishi, I'm thirsty. So get some water. But Maishi, I'm too tired to get out of bed. Could you get out of bed and get me a cup of coffee? Get me a cup of water? Could you imagine that conversation happening? And can you imagine Maishi actually getting out of bed, getting a cup of water, and bringing it to his friend who's in bed? Now, you and I aren't asked to do this, but if a person really reached the heights of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, if I really love my friend as I do myself, I would get out of bed, get a cup of water, and bring it to my friend because he's thirsty, because I'm obligated to love him as I do myself. That's what V'ahavta l'recha kamocha means. And if you'd like to understand what it means in plain, simple language, and one of the great Hasidic Rebbeim, the Lovava, he was known as an Ohev Yisrael. And in a sefer called Tfer Shlomo, they write about this Lovava Rebbe, and here's what he says about him. The Lovava Rebbe once got up and said, how could you call me an Ohev Yisrael? How could you say I love every Jew? I love my children more than I love other people. If I was a real lover of the Klal Yisrael, I would love everyone equal to my children. I'm nowhere near that. That was Mordechai. That's not me. I'm nowhere near that level. Do you hear what he's saying? What he's saying is he's lamenting the fact that he loves his children more than he loves others. But that's ultimately the level that a tzaddik would reach. And if you really, really reach the pinnacle, the absolute heights of V'ahavta l'recha kamocha, you love every Jew as you do yourself. So my Rebbe, the Shivas Atzal, asked, how could Ben Azai say that there's a greater principle than that? How could anything bring you to greater heights of being concerned for other people's good, and doing chesed for them. V'ahavta l'recha kamocha is the greatest imaginable level. How could Ben Azai say there's a principle that will bring you to even greater heights in Ben Adam l'chaveru, in treating your friend properly? And if you'd like to know the answer to this question, I'll share with you a mashal. For this mashal, you have to pick a hero, someone you really respect, and imagine that this hero comes to your house. So I'm going to do it in terms, let's say it was a year ago, and I find out that Rav Chaim Kanievsky is coming to America. He needs a place to stay, and he asks to stay in my house. Oh my goodness, the Gadol Hador is coming. Oh my, I spend weeks cleaning and preparing, and when he comes here, oh, everything, what can I do for the Shiva? What can I do? How can I help? Could you imagine if I had the privilege, the extraordinary opportunity of having the Gadol Yisrael in my house? No effort would be too great. No energy that I would expand would be considered enough. I would do anything and everything because, oh my goodness, look who I have the opportunity of serving. My Rebbe Shmuz Zatzal said that's what Ben Azai is teaching us. If I train my eye to see, I look at my friend and I see, oh my goodness, an image of Hashem, an image of God Himself. Do you understand the honor due to that person? And do you understand the cover that I have to treat him with? Oh my goodness, look at that person. I would do anything for him. I would climb any mountain, ford any stream because, oh my God, look at that person. And that's how the Shiva Zatzal explained in Ben Azai. It's true, Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha is a great principle. Loving your friend like yourself will bring you to great heights. But says Ben Azai, this will bring you to even greater heights. Why? Because as much as you love your friend, you love him as yourself. How much am I going to do for myself? How much am I going to go? But when I see my friend, and I see in him the image of God, the honor due to such a person, oh my goodness, it's beyond description, and that will propel me to much greater heights, and that is the answer to Ben Azai. And I got to see this in a very real way in my own life. As again, I mentioned, I was a high school Rebbe for many years, and one year there was a fellow who was doing very, very well in my shir, extremely well, and we're pretty close. And one day something happened, a certain event in the dorm, and the decision was made to expel him from the yeshiva. I went into Rabbi Duritz of the yeshiva and I said, you can't do it. He's a great guy, he's learning, he's steiging, he's a mensch. And I was going on and on, pleading my case. When I left the office, the word quickly spread that I was defending this fellow, and it seemed like every single guy in the yeshiva, from the 9th grade to the kollel, came over to me and said, you're nuts, the guy's a mechutzav, he's a manuvel, he's horrible, he's terrible. On and on, they were telling me how bad the guy is, what he does. Oh my God. And I said to myself, I don't get it. I know the guy very well. He's in shir every day. 3-4 hours a day, I'm with him, whether it's chavrusas or giving shir directly. I'm involved with the guy. How could it be that they have such a vastly different understanding of him than I do? And the answer is that to me, he acted very differently. He respected me, looked at me as a Rebbe he wanted to impress, and he had a very different demeanor, very different behavior towards me than he did to the guys in the dorm, and he put on a much different face. And I believe this concept of knowing who people are and respecting them appropriately is a tremendous yesod in Ben Adam L'Chavero. Ben Azai is teaching us that it's greater than V'ahavta l'recha kamocha. If you want to learn to really be a mensch, if you really want to be the type of person who serves Hashem as you're supposed to, get this image clearly in your mind. Every Jew, every human being is created in the image of Hashem. If I train my eye to see that, I'll treat them with honor, with tremendous accord, and I will be a vastly different person towards them. One more step. For many years I was involved in martial arts, and I remember once going to a karate tournament, and there was a group of black belts sitting around, and they began discussing a certain fighter, and one of the fellows said, that guy, he can't punch his way out of a wet paper bag. And the other fellows laughed. And I said to myself, wait a minute. They were talking about another black belt. The guy was a killer. The guy's hands probably should be registered with the police department as lethal weapons. How could they say he can't punch his way out of a wet paper bag? And the answer is, the guy they were talking about was a 1st-degree black belt, and these guys were 2nd-degree black belts. And that was the way they viewed him. From their perspective, he was not even a fighter. But they forgot the fact that he was quite a dangerous killer. They viewed him from their standard. And I believe that's exactly the answer to the students of Rebbe Akiva. Believe me, they had chesed committees and they treated each other with honor, but they made one mistake. When your friend is a Tana, when your friend is a tremendous Talmud Chacham, it's not enough to treat him with the honor due to a regular person. You have to treat him with accord and honor due to a tremendous Talmud Chacham and to one of the pillars of the world. And as much as they were nice guys, and as much as they acted nicely to each other, and as much as they treated each other properly, appropriately, they didn't treat each other with the kavod due to the tremendous Talmidei Chachamim who they were. And they acted like the second-degree black belts who looked at them, first-degree black belt, he's nothing. They looked at their friends as regular friends. But when your friend is a tremendous Talmud Chacham, you have to act very differently. My uncle Shmuel, my wife's uncle, was a Talmud of Rosh Yeshiva Zatzal. Now, a little quick story. The Rosh Yeshiva became Rosh Yeshiva at 24 years of age. My Rebbe, the Rosh Yeshiva, Rebbe Leibowitz, his father started the yeshiva, and his father passed away. And my Rebbe, the Rosh Yeshiva, was 24 years of age. He went to Rav Aaron Kotler. Rav Aaron Kotler spoke to him in learning and said, yes, you should be the Rosh Yeshiva. So he took over the yeshiva at the age of 24 years of age. Okay, now, my wife's uncle was learning in yeshiva. Wasn't just learning in yeshiva, he was good friends with the Rosh Yeshiva. They had played ball together as kids. They grew up together in Williamsburg. They played ball together. They were good buddies. And Uncle Shmuel said to me that for 6 months, he didn't talk to the Rosh Yeshiva. 6 months. When he became Rosh Yeshiva, he didn't talk to him. I said, why not? Why don't you talk to him? He said, very simple. To talk to him like a friend, I can't talk to him like a friend. He's a Rosh Yeshiva. To talk to him like a Rosh Yeshiva, I can't do that. He's my friend. For 6 months, he didn't talk to him. Now, I don't know if that was the best decision, but that was the point. When your best friend becomes a person of tremendous stature, he's your buddy, but he's no longer your buddy in the way you act to him. You have to act differently, to treat him with respect, and you have to remember he's now occupying a position, and even if you remember him playing ball back in the old days, he now occupies a position, and you have to treat him with the honor due. And that is, I believe, what the Gemara is sharing with us. And that is, the Talmidim of Rebbe Akiva treated each other with respect, plenty of respect. I dare say a lot more than you and I treat each other with. But the key mistake was they forgot that their friends were tremendous individuals, tremendous Talmidei Chachamim, pillars of the world. And you can't act that way to your friend when he occupies that position. Lo nogu kavod zelazeh, says the Marsha. Lo nogu kavod Torah. They didn't treat each other with the due kavod, the due honor due to Talmidei Chachamim of that stature. And I believe that there is a tremendous lesson for us from this Gemara. And that is because we now live in the age of disrespect. There is no institution, no individual, nothing left that's treated with respect. I cannot describe the disrespect that's abundant and just so incredibly prevalent that it's beyond description. There's a mission in Sota, Be'ikva Mashiach Chutzpah Yisage. In a time of Mashiach Chutzpah, audacity will just spread out. It'll be everywhere. It is beyond description, the lack of respect. I was a regular kid growing up in the United States of America. I would never have spoken to my father, to my mother, the way my children speak to me, the way kids speak to their parents in a million, and I was plenty wild a kid. But my wildest friends would never speak the way, but really that's nothing. I'll share with you something that I experienced back in the 1980s when I was on a bus in Israel. I'm riding a bus and 2 American people are in front of me and they're speaking. Ed and Bob, Ed, what do you think, Bob? What do you think, Ed? Bob, Ed. The only thing unusual is one was much older than the other. And I couldn't help but hear the conversation, and after a while it became clear one was a father and one was a son. This was, the outgrowth of the counterculture revolution of the 60s, throw off all the old ways. So Bob calls Ed, Ed calls Bob, but we don't call Dad, too formal, and we're on a first name basis. In the 1950s, in the United States of America, nurses were trained. When a doctor walks in the room, a nurse stands up. because he's a man of learning. He's a man of stature. Doctors wore white coats because being a doctor meant you occupied a certain position. Now everyone is called by their first name, by their last name. There's nothing left. I can't begin to describe the difference between respect of the 1950s in the United States of America and our current time. And one of the manifestations of that is we argue with everybody. We argue with our doctors, we argue with our lawyers, we argue with our rabbis, and we are all, it's an egalitarian society. We're all equal, we're all the same. Would you like to know what I'm talking about? I'll give you a little experiment. If you are 40 years or younger, try this one on me. When your father or your mother walks into the room, I challenge you to stand up. Try this little musar exercise. When your father or your mother walks in the room, I want you to stand up to your full height. Now again, as a high school Rebbe, I would speak to the guys and I would point out an interesting observation. It's a mitzvah aseh midaraisa to treat your father with respect. It's a halach in Shulchan Aruch that you're obligated to stand up, but stand up doesn't mean like stand up to your full height when your father or your mother walks into the room. And I would tell guys, when you go home, I want you to do that. It's a halach in Shulchan Aruch, you're obligated. And guys would describe, what are you kidding? Stand up? My father would say like the king of England, like what? Stand up? Like what? You know why it's so strange? It's so strange because we don't know what it means to treat another human being with honor, and certainly to treat someone with the honor due to them. It is a very difficult time we live in because the respect for individuals, respect for people is gone. And I'm going to say something over here. This is not a political discourse over here, and I do not agree with everything the President of the United States of America says or does, and I'm not discussing his competency for the job, but I'd like to share with you, it is the height of audacity to mock him and make fun of him. And you may have your opinions, and I may share your opinions, but you have to remember that he occupies the seat of power, and therefore it's deserving of respect. And all of the TikTok videos and all of the stuff that goes around showing the, I don't want to say the expressions, but the dementia patient, that's what the expressions are. It is absolutely, it's a disgusting thing to do. It's not understanding the respect due to the position. He occupies a position. You may not respect the individual. You may not like the individual. You may not agree with the individual, but you have to respect the position. You have to speak respectfully, and you have to respect that position. And it's an issue that we have to think about because it affects everything that we do. But I'd like to share with you where it affects us more than anywhere else. Quick plug for the book, The 10 Really Dumb Mistakes That Very Smart Couples Make. Here we go. I want to share with you two scenes. Scene 1 and scene 2, and I'm going to ask you what's the difference between them. Scene 1, a young man and a young woman are walking down the street. The young man trips. She says, "Oy vey, are you okay? Are you all right?" That's scene 1. Scene 2, the same young man, same young woman walking down the street, and the young man trips, and she says, "Klutz, what's wrong with you? You can't even walk straight?" What's the difference between scene 1 and scene 2? So the answer is scene 1 is when they're chassan and kala. Scene 2 is when they're married already 3 years. And I'd like to share with you, this is one of the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make. As I've said many times in that book, love is vital to a marriage. It's a glue of the marriage. But if there isn't respect, the marriage will very quickly devolve. It'll very quickly turn into a very, very ugly scene. And respect is a key ingredient in all relationships. The closer the relationship, the more it's needed. And ironically, the closer the relationship is, the less we treat each other with respect. John Gottman, who's a researcher, has an interesting experiment. He brings a husband and wife into his lab and he videotapes everything. He has them discussing certain topics. He videotapes, he has monitors on them measuring their pulse, their respiration. And then after they speak, he asks the husband to leave and he brings in a stranger. And he videotapes that conversation. Brings back the husband, asks the wife to leave, brings in another. Basically what he's looking for is the way partners speak to each other and the way they speak to utter strangers. And here's what he's found. Invariably, whether the couple is newly married or married many, many years, they'll speak far more respectfully to an utter stranger than they will to their own spouse. But even worse, they'll argue far less with an utter stranger than they will with their own spouse. And if they do argue, they're far more respectful and far more ready to accede to the stranger's position than they are to their own spouse. And it seems to be a rule of thumb that we treat each other with disrespect. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share with you that is disastrous for a marriage. Now, many people say to me, yeah, but Rabbi, what do you want me to be like? What am I on stage? I got to be formal? You're never formal, but it's a very sad state of affairs. If you listen to the way couples speak to each other, the disrespect is appalling. I'm a big fan of breaking the smartphone, but there's one device on the smartphone that is invaluable. It's the recorder. Put it on sometime when you're speaking to your spouse. Put it on sometime when you're speaking to your teenage son, and listen to the way you speak to each other. And what you're going to find is that we all have something to think about. We all have something to work on. And I'd like to share with you why it's so disastrous. In the 1980s, there was a known protocol for dealing with alcoholics. It was accepted that alcoholics were pathological liars, immature personality defenses. They were in denial. And the typical protocol demanded that when you were dealing with an alcoholic, you confronted him. Typically, there was an intervention. You would bring in the whole family and the friends and everybody, and they'd all sit around the table and point at him and say, "You're an alcoholic. Stop denying you're alcoholic." Okay, that was the protocol. And interestingly enough, it failed. Alcoholic after alcoholic remained alcoholic, and these protocols didn't work. And the interventions didn't work at all. Carl Rogers was a psychologist, and unrelated to anything with alcoholism, he began studying the state of the human condition, and he reached an interesting observation. He reached the observation that when a person feels unacceptable, when they experience themselves as unworthy, they're blocked from moving. And he explains, on the other hand, when people experience themselves accepted as they are, all of a sudden they're free to change. Now that may seem rather obvious to you and I, but it wasn't obvious to the entire psychological world, the entire mental health profession in the 1980s and 1990s. And what they discovered now is that the reason why they were so ineffective is because they were making the problem so much worse. Would you like to understand what I mean? I'll share with you a tip for life. How do you win an argument? I have a foolproof method to win every argument you'll ever get into. And more than that, I guarantee it's the only way that you'll ever win an argument. The single way to win any argument is very simple. Adopt the other guy's position. All you got to do to win the argument is adopt the other guy's position, and suddenly when you argue his position, he's going to readily accept yours. But why is that? Because it's human nature. When I confront you, when I come on strongly and aggressively against you, it's natural for you to defend yourself. And if you've ever noticed, the only thing an argument does is entrench each side further and more deeply into their position. Many a time I've been tempted to tell a wife and husband, just switch sides, guys. I want you to argue the other side. Because invariably when I'm arguing against you and I'm coming at you with charged emotions and I'm saying my position strongly, what's going to happen is you're going to dig in your heels and you're going to present your position even more strongly, and all an argument ever does is make each side more convinced that they're right. And this is the great discovery. Any alcoholic knows there's a lot wrong with what he's doing. Any diabetic understands that there are real dangers and damages in their lifestyle. Any person who needs to lose weight understands that. And the problem is that when I tell them in my authoritative manner, when I tell them they have to, they need to, they must, all that's happening is I'm forcing something down their throat, and naturally there's a resistance. And that resistance comes back to haunt them. And what they now do with alcoholics is quite the opposite. They deal with them very differently. Would you like to understand that fellow back in my high school shir? Would you like to know why he acted differently towards me than he did to everyone else in yeshiva? It had nothing to do with the fact that he respected me. It was much deeper than that. He understood that I deeply respected him. He felt accepted, he felt approved of, and therefore he performed. And it became a self-fulfilling prophecy. I looked at him as a very bright guy. He was put together. He seemed like a real mensch. He spoke beautifully. He really put on and what. So I treated him exactly that way. And because I treated him that way, I created an environment for him to actually change, to grow. And this is the great yesod for dealing with human beings. When you treat them with respect, when you treat them with honor, when you treat them as if they're acceptable and approved of, they perform for the heights. But when you treat them with disregard, when you treat them as if they're unworthy, as if they're dirty, as if they're worthless, all you're doing is creating an environment that will not allow them to ever change. You're entrenching them in their position. In a minute, especially if you're going to argue against them, you're going to further entrench them. And that is the great secret for human behavior. Would you like to know why this is very, very applicable? If you are married, it's very applicable. If you have children, it's very applicable. All you have to do is ask yourself how you deal with your child. But I'll share with you an observation of marriage. And again, only because I'm in the book now and I'm pushing the book, let me focus this on marriage for a minute. It is one of those very interesting experiences that after about 6 months of marriage, we each become experts at what our spouse does wrong. It doesn't matter how good your marriage is. It doesn't matter how bad your marriage is. Every spouse becomes an expert at what their spouse does wrong. And they spend countless amounts of energy, effort, and time trying to change their spouse. Either she's too late, or she's too early, she's too timid, or she's too bold. Whatever it is, there's something wrong, and it's my job in life to get her to change. Now, interestingly enough, it fails time after time. Matter of fact, I have a little theory about marriage, that usually after about 20 years of marriage, the first 20 years will be kind of and suddenly many marriages just take off, they flourish. First 20 years kind of kvetching, kind of hovering, and then suddenly it becomes much, much better. Would you like to know my theory why that happens? For 20 years she's been trying to change him. For 20 years she's trying her darndest, and finally she gives up. He's a stubborn ox, he's not going to change anyway. So she stops trying to change him, and suddenly he's a nicer guy. Suddenly he's so much easier to live with. Suddenly he's so much more pleasant. And this seems to be endemic in the human species, this need to change our spouse. We become experts at what they do wrong, and we may be nice about it, we may be pleasant, but we try our best to get them to change. Now, why is that so disastrous in a marriage, you may ask? What's the big deal? It's human nature, okay? Watch this one. What does it feel like to be loved? If I ask you, what does it feel like to be on the receiving end of being loved? Likely you're going to say to me something like accepted, approved of, cherished, right? Feels good. Okay. And what does it feel like to be respected? You can probably use similar words. Appreciated, esteemed, accepted, approved, right? What does it feel like when someone tries to change you? What it feels like is not accepted, not appreciated, you're not good enough, you are inadequate. And would you like to know what your spouse hears when you try to change them? If your spouse is a male, and what your spouse is going to hear is, you are small. I'm your boss. I'm in charge. You will listen. I do not respect you. If your spouse is a wife, she's going to hear the message, I don't cherish you. I don't love you. You don't matter to me. And when you try to change your spouse, and what happens is you're giving them this very powerful meta message of, you're not accepted, you're not approved of, you're making it very, very difficult for your spouse to like you, let alone love you. And I believe there's a tremendous lesson from this Gemara. The Talmidim, Rebbe Akiva, acted as real menschim. They had chesed committees, they had gemachs, and they acted with honor. But they acted with the honor due to a regular person. They forgot that their friends were tremendous Talmidei Chachamim. And when you treat your friend as if he's a regular person, but he's dignitary and he's worthy of so much more, you're acting in a very improper way. And I believe the message to us is that honor is essential for all human conduct. What Ben Azai was teaching us is, if you want to be a mensch, and you want to deal with people properly, you want to treat people well, is great, love them like yourself, that's wonderful. But if you understand, my friend is created in the image of Hashem. This human being I'm looking at is created in the image of Hashem. The honor due to him is beyond anything I can imagine. and that will propel you to much greater heights. But why? Why? Because, oh my goodness, look who walked in the door. Rav Chaim Kanevsky came to my house. Oh my goodness, what wouldn't I do for him? And what wouldn't expense wouldn't I? How could I possibly serve you? That understanding that my friend is created in the image of Hashem, and that understanding propels you to heights that even V'ahavta Recha Kamocha won't propel you to. And why? Because that respect I'll treat them with, I'll have a much easier time doing things for them, I'll have a much easier time bending over backwards for them, and that is the yesod. In all human relationships, this is the yesod, especially when you're in a family, when you're dealing with your children, when you're dealing with your parents. It's very natural to put down your hair, but unfortunately it's a very disastrous thing, especially with children and especially in marriage. But I want to close with one last observation. Okay, the Talmidim of Rebbe Akiva weren't great. They weren't Noai Kavod Zeh B'Zeh, but that's why they die. You killed 24,000 students because they didn't reach the heights of treating respect. And I'd like to ask you another question. We are now in exile. The reason we're in exile is because of the sinas chinam, the baseless hatred of the second Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. Okay, it's not great. I'm not saying it's great, but there are 613 mitzvahs, and one of them is they were violated. Why is it such a big deal? And why did Hashem feel that he had to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, send the Jews into exile? They can't be in the land anymore. They're not worthy of being there. There has to be a total change. Why did Hashem have to kill 24,000 students because it's such a little thing? Would you like to know the answer to this? Hashem created us to grow, to accomplish, to change the essence of ourselves. Hashem created us to perfect ourselves. And the measure of all perfection is Hashem. Hashem is the meitiv, the one who gives, the ultimate benefactor, the ultimate giver. The way Hashem runs the world is by being a meitiv. When we're trying to perfect ourselves, it's by being more like Hashem. If you're not a Baal Chesed, if you're not helping other people, if you're not treating other people with honor, if you're not really working on V'ahavta Recha Kamocha, you're so far from what Hashem is that you're in a different plane. It's not that you're a little bit off, you're way off, you're way off target. You're nothing like Hashem. You're not growing, you're not perfecting. It's not a little imperfection. It's so off target that you're not even in the category anymore. And they were the shalshelet, they were the chain, they were the Masorah. When you're off in treating with respect, it's so disastrous. It's not in the category of Eved Hashem. And I think the yesod for us is the honor due to our friends and the honor due to our children, to our parents, to our wives is beyond description. The way to focus on it is to remember they're created in the image of Hashem. When you work on that, Hashem helps, and you change the way you look at them and the way you act. And now I'd like to open the floor to questions, thoughts, observations. Please feel free to raise your hand if you'd like to. If you're a little shy, you can certainly type it in, but I appreciate if people raise their hands and ask questions. Please feel free to ask. It can be on this topic or any other topic, but again, please feel free to ask. Okay, Avram, it looks like you have the floor. Avram, go ahead. Hi.
Good evening, Rebbe.
Good evening. Hi.
Interesting question. The interesting question is, let's see your scenario. I know this could fall under probably many topics, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a parent, child, spouse, whatever, before anything. But I'm just curious. Let's say you have a scenario where you're dealing with somebody else who you have to have a relationship with, and you can clearly tell that one of the issues is that they're being dishonest to you. They're being, putting you down. They're not giving you honor to you, and they're clearly in that. I mean, maybe they don't realize they're doing it, but that's what they're doing. How do you not be down from that scenario and still show them respect without trying to change the scenario?
My son has a expression: "Kill him with love, kill him with respect, kill him with love." I'm not saying it's easy to do, but unless you'd like to make an enemy, you have to ignore that, and you have to. The more honor and covet you treat them with, the nicer you treat them, likely the more they'll reciprocate. Unfortunately, because I believe once you're talking about marriage, it gets a lot more complicated. I have a great book that I think every husband and wife should read together. The 10 Really Dumb Mistakes. This is great marriage therapy. Husbands and wife, read it together. Now, when you read it together, you see it's a lot easier when you hear the stories of other couples and other people, and it's not your husband blaming you, not your wife blaming you, I think it becomes a lot easier. But that's my recommendation. I'm not saying it's an easy situation, but I am telling you the only way you can win that is by treating them with more honor, more respect. And if it's a wife, then read the book together, and in Hashem, it'll hopefully become easier. All right? Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, my pleasure. Okay. Let me just mute this and move on. Please feel free to raise your hand if you have a question. You can ask a question on this topic or any other topic. Okay. I have Edward online. Edward, actually, one second. I have to disable talking over here. Edward, you are on. Shalom Aleichem. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great, Rebbe. I missed, a few Zooms with you.
A few Zooms, Edward. It was more than a few. Oh my goodness, a lot more than a few.
Yeah.
I haven't seen you in a long time. I'm sorry?
One world, two chances, something like that. So I like it very much, by the way. And but about the marriage, it's a lot I picked up from your Shmuz. By the way, I'm on number 125. So,
Edward, I love you. That's great. That's great.
Yes. About the marriage. I mean, I got it very late, like 27 by standard 35 years ago. It was like very late. Everybody get married at 20. Anyway, I had 2 daughters, everything is fine. But since I've been married forever, I don't have much respect to this institution because to live with one woman, it's like to eat buckwheat for the rest of your life. It's pretty hard. By the way,
I'd like to hear what your wife has to say. No, I'm not asking. No, I'm not starting.
She's very, let's say she's very lenient. I know, I always say King Solomon had 700 wives. So if I have a few weekend wives, it's going to be okay too. But I'm taking it of the law, it's expired after 1,000 years, that you have to have one wife. Yes or no?
Edward, you could handle 2 wives? You could handle 2 wives? I don't know many men who could handle 1 wife. Is your wife happy?
Yes, pretty much.
Pretty much?
I got, when the law expired, I got 2 more, a little younger. I swapped one wife at 50 for 225.
Edward, is your wife happy?
Yes, I think so.
You think
so? Stay with always.
If she's happy, then you're doing a good job. If she's not happy, you're not doing a good job. If she's happy, you're doing a good job.
Yeah, I got 5 reasons when the law expired. And by the way, I didn't make a mistake like Jacob did with Laban. I was not sure I got married on the person I want to marry.
I hear you. Listen, it's good hearing from you. Good sharing. And I'm glad to hear you up to 125. Keep me posted. Let's hear how you keep moving. All right?
All right. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good. Okay, please feel free if you have any questions to either raise your hand or you can type a question in. But in the meantime, let me just mention a few things. First of all, beginning this coming Wednesday, we have a new series starting, Mitzvah Hashem. The series is called Becoming a Whole Person. It's a weekly share on how to achieve a balanced and healthy sense of self. Really, I hope it'll be very, very meaningful, because this concept of self-image is something that plagues many people, if not all of us. And understanding the Torah's perspective of having a very strong, healthy sense of the greatness of a human being, and at the same time being humble, is something that's not easy at all. And what we're going to be working on a lot is the understanding of what arrogance is, what humility is, how the Torah is supposed to view, how you're supposed to view yourself from a Torah perspective. And in fact, that balance, I think, is key and essential for all activities in life. And I think if we had an understanding of the Torah's perspective, we would act very, very differently. So I believe it's a very important series. I hope it'll be about 8 weeks. I'm not sure exactly how long it'll last. As we develop it, it'll come out, but it'll be starting this coming Wednesday night at 8 p.m. You'll see, if you're not getting the updates, so if you go to WhatsApp, you get the Shmuz WhatsApp Chizuk group. If you'd like to join, to get the updates and to get replays, etc., go to the shmuz.com, THESHMUZ.com. On the top, you'll see a banner. You click on the banner, and you'll be able to get, you'll become a member of the Shmuz WhatsApp group, and then you'll get all notifications of the coming shiurim. You'll get the replays. For instance, tonight, we'll go out in Mitzvah Shem tomorrow, etc. But in any case, beginning this coming Wednesday night is Becoming a Whole Person. Again, it'll be about an 8-week series on creating a balanced self-image, dealing with humility, arrogance, finding a proper self-image. If you haven't got a chance to get a copy of the 10 really dumb mistakes that very smart couples make, please go to the shmuz.com. If you can get it on Amazon, you can get it at your Jewish bookstores. But if you go to the shmuz.com, you also get the audiobook, ebook, as well as a marriage transformation boot camp as a free bonus. Okay, if anyone has any questions, please type it in. If not, I assume we're all good and all questions have been answered. That's wonderful. Okay, I thank you very much for joining, and I hope to see you Wednesday night and next week in Mitzvah Shem on the Shmuz Live. Thank you very much.